Is the false sky a prison for everyone living within Teyvat? Or is the false sky a protection barrier for everyone living in Teyvat from all of the external threats outside Teyvat? The answer? Yes. Both are equally true. The Primordial One came to Teyvat to be benevolent to humanity under a certain set of rules or principles to keep humanity in this isolated world safe and protected, but also ultimately trapped living under the same samsara and fate, an endless cycle never to break free, to protect humanity from its own arrogation. I mean, the word Teyvat itself is Hebrew for an ark, and an ark is a ship built by Noah from the Bible in order to save his family and two of each animal from the flood, from their demise. I want to go over exactly what the false sky is in this video, but also go over Teyvat's entire history of aliens, from the beginning of the timeline up until our current game and everything in between. Teyvat has been influenced by aliens, whether it be actual beings like Skirk, the Traveler itself, the Melusines in Fontaine, the ruined technologies everywhere scattered. Teyvat is littered with alien influence throughout its entire history. I mean, the first time you ever played this game, the first thing you saw, the first cutscene, was two alien siblings fighting another alien. Teyvat is like a giant prison. Everyone living within the prison is not allowed to know of anything outside the prison, or leave or get out. You can't advance too far or ask too many questions. Gods, humans, archons even doesn't matter. Even the angels in the Four Shades are not exempt from this. But if you live outside the prison, you're not allowed in, or to bring that technology, forbidden knowledge, or any intel within the prison. Obviously this has failed miserably, as Teyvat has had endless amount of alien incursions, different technologies, monsters, sciences, people, doesn't end. But that is due to the arrogation of mankind, their endless ambition to try to break away from anything or anyone controlling them. They are being kept safe within this bubble world and false sky, but they are also trapped to never advance too far, control their own fates or lives. Even their minds and memories are connected through Irminsul. No one has true freedom. The heavenly principles must be terrified so badly of what's beyond this world that they came here and orchestrated this from the beginning of time. The Fatui Harbingers trying to break free from every aspect of this through Irminsul burning, collecting the Gnosis, gaining all of this intel. The Archons are basically like jail wardens, working for Celestia, make sure everything is kosher, but they're also no different. They're in the same boat. They are a prisoner, they're just a high-ranking prisoner, also confined to their fates. Let's go over the false sky first. What it actually is, what it was intended to do by the Primordial One originally, and how it actually functions, what purpose it serves. This is how Teyvat is set up right now. The false sky and the stars in the fake sky along with the fake moon is all simulated, as you can see, but Teyvat within the false sky is like coded, like a computer program. Irminsul and the false sky working hand in hand. I already touched on this before, but the constellations and the waypoints make up everyone in Teyvat. That is why each playable character, their constellations can be traced out through the waypoints, and astrologers like Barbara Luth and Mona can read people's fates and everything about them because everyone is coded within Teyvat. Their fate, everything predetermined. The very idea of breaking away from this fate has already been discussed multiple times, most recently by Capitano. Even the gods and archons are not immune to this, and then we know through Irminsul everyone's history and data, their memories, neurologically like a hive mind computer database, connects everyone in Teyvat. And if you want to take the computer analogy even further with Irminsul, look at Nahida's attacks, it's like a keyboard. And Irminsul and the ley lines combat the abyss, sort of like malware getting rid of a virus. Anything that breaches inside the false sky, or the little bubble, like different monsters or the abyss. Now I'll explore at the end of the video why the Primordial One came to Teyvat, but when they did, it took them 40 days to defeat the dragons. And this would be when the false sky was first created. Now in the past 4 years, they've given us snippets of different information on the false sky and what happened. When you put them all together, it paints a pretty obvious picture. Let's go over all we know, and pretty much towards the end of it, I won't even have to give a summary. It's going to be fairly obvious. The false sky literally started out as a theory in Teyvat, most notably by the Wanderer, formerly a Fatui Harbinger Scaramouche. but also Ildidore that traded this information of the false sky to Nahida, an Archon of wisdom, for a gnosis. But ever since Natlan in 5.1, we have had legitimate proof of this false sky. We can see it plain as day now. It's no longer just words spoken. The Pyro Archon referring to it as the split sky phenomenon. So some Archons are aware of this. In the Unreconciled Stars event, Scaramouche all the way back in 1.1 referred to the false sky as a giant hoax and a lie. According to Ildidore, the second Fatui Harbinger, the false sky is the secret hidden by Irminsul concerning the truth of this world. This whole thing about Irminsul concealing the truth of this world is also been referenced by Khaenri'ah, who believe of a reality reflected beyond Teyvat's skies, and King Deshret, who learned about the false sky and the truth of this world from Nabu, a fallen angel from old Celestia. He would often mention how the sky is missing the 3 bright moons, and how the celestial sphere, the false moon you can see every night, is an illusion. King Deshret inspired Nabu to potentially a world or possibility to transcend the absurd shackles that govern this world. So King Deshret rejected a gift from the divine throne, which was the Dendronosis, to be the Archon of Sumeru. See, what's interesting about Nabu, the goddess of flowers, we learn a lot through her artifact set. She was an angel in Celestia in the original days of the Primordial One and the first civilizations of humanity. This angel states that it was a faraway time of calm and peace. Divine envoys spoke openly with the people then, bringing them the word from the heavens. But eventually, invaders descended to Teyvat, bringing with them destruction, overturning rivers and spreading plagues. And though the invaders brought war to the former kin, they also brought illusions that could break through the shackles of this land. But the Master of the Heavens, which is obviously the Primordial One or the Heavenly Principles, consumed by fear for rising tide of delusion and breakthroughs, sent down the divine nails to mend the land, laying waste to the mortal realm. And the angels of Celestia, most of them Seelies now, banished to Teyvat in exile and torment, stripped of our connection to the heavens and their powers of enlightenment. Since this disaster, I have long been cursed to never again look upon the heavens. Nabu is one of very few angels that got to keep her body when cast from the heavens. Now Faunus the Primordial One, referenced in Enkanomiya in a book before Sun and Moon, is described to have separated Teyvat's atmosphere and microcosm from a much larger universe unknown. Faunus was said to have been born from an eggshell, and we know that the Primordial One is not from Teyvat, but this book referenced how Faunus used its own eggshell, and this eggshell became the false sky that we can see, cloaking off Teyvat from everything else, isolating it from the outside world, and that the Primordial One did this out of love for humanity. But much of humanity, throughout different books, texts, and artifacts, reference being in a cage, being trapped. Even Istaroth, the Shade of Time, describes feeling trapped within a shell of a sky. And Nivelette, the new Hydro Dragon, even references the idea of a world being imprisoned in an eggshell, even referring to it as a prison. The description of the all-devouring narwhal suggests that Teyvat may be protected and isolated from a larger universe and other external threats, and that many different worlds in another universe have been constantly trying to infiltrate Teyvat since the beginning days, which goes greatly with what Alice states, that Teyvat's borders have been fragile these past few years, revealing what I even said right away when this happened. Not just proof of the false sky and what lies beyond, but a shattered moon, which goes along with what King Deshret suspects. We're missing some moons in the sky, which is obviously a direct reference to the 3 moon sisters that lived in the lunar palace in Celestia before the War of Vengeance. The Pyro Archon goes on to tell us that the reason people of Natlan don't panic is because almost nobody is even aware of the Shades, Celestia, or what has ever happened or transpired within Teyvat. As far as the regular people know, the Archons are the top of the food chain, but we obviously know that couldn't be further from the truth. Mavwika is able to describe the occurrence of the false sky in Natlan as a astronomical anomaly, which the people are going to trust and believe their Archon. Split sky phenomenon closed shortly after. but the shattered celestial body it revealed is now faintly visible from Natlan from time to time. Now, one of the most commonly debated things is, why are they here? Why did the Primordial One come to Teyvat in the first place, even create this false sky? We don't know the answer to this for sure, but to me it seems kind of somewhat obvious. To escape the Abyss and other threats, we have yet to confirm what's out there. We know of other different threats in the other Hoyoverse games, like the Honkai, the biggest one, the Hersters, the Eons, the Emanators, different factions that are dangerous. There are many different games and worlds that are way more advanced and powerful with much more dangerous individuals than Teyvat has ever had. So now that we went through all that info about the Primordial One and the False Sky scattered throughout Teyvat in different regions, characters, now let's paint a picture here. Let's break down what exactly happened. The Primordial One came to Teyvat and beat the dragons after 40 days, conquered Teyvat, but didn't slaughter the dragons. So the Primordial One wasn't just a bloodthirsty, evil character or being. And like we just discussed, used the eggshell from which it was born to create the false sky. It never started out as a prison though. It was a barrier to keep Teyvat safe as long as humans' arrogation didn't get out of control. This is where fate, the constellations, the giant samsara, and Irminsul all established to work together, connecting everyone in Teyvat, the history, their minds, neurologically as a hive mind to make sure that doesn't happen. But this is what they established. Not to be a prison originally, but to protect them for their own good. Then after 400 days, humanity arrived. This is the first era of humanity. The Four Shades, Celestia, and all of its angels also created to help guide humanity. The Four Shades and all the angels being a creation of an alien, but all of the angels themselves always being from Teyvat, being created here and being created to love and guide humanity. And during this first era of humanity, the ancient civilizations of Teyvat, humanity looked up to the gods in the heavens, took their guidance, was grateful for their blessings, and lived very humble, peaceful lives. No war, no conflicts for a long, long time. And because of this, the Primordial One was happy, rejoiced, and was referred to as benevolent, everything according to plan, within the false sky. Humanity oblivious to the worlds outside. What lies beyond? Man, they sound a lot like us. We know for sure our government wouldn't tell us if there was aliens, even if there was. But humanity unknowingly were now in a samsara. During the first era, it was said that the Primordial One and the Four Shades established a cycle. Humanity would prosper for a long time but eventually meet its end and then repeat the cycle. Civilization is born, advances a bit, eventually gets wiped out or comes to a halt and has to restart. This is the samsara that's constantly referred to in the game. From the Narsus and Croynes who did research, figuring out that Teyvat is a samsara, and well, Nahida actually just tells us straight up, this is what the samsara is. Humanity to live wholesome, humble lives, but never to advance or get too curious, become too powerful, too smart, advance too far. Humanity being protected from the outside world, from a false sky and fates already sealed within the false sky, the constellations, and Irminsul. Humanity not even being aware of this, even to this day they're not. The angels and shades fell in love with humanity, because that was the purpose they were created to do, but even some angels had relationships with humans, which angered the heavenly principles. For Celestia and its angels was created as a tool for the heavenly principles for this whole charade they set up, right from the beginning, much like a prison guard falling in love with the inmates. And the inmates not even knowing they're in a prison. But even before Nibelung returned and the war in the heavens took place, the second half of the first era of humanity, or towards the end, humanity started to suspect that something's amiss. They stopped trusting the gods and their words and wisdom as much, started getting curious, asking bigger and broader questions about their existence and purpose in all of this. The samsara that they're now stuck in, starting to realize this, and humans started to get smarter, more ingenuity, working together with the dragons and advancing a little bit too much to the heavenly principles' likings, actually upsetting them. This is the first signs of the benevolent Primordial One no longer being so benevolent, already during this time. And once Nibelung brought forbidden knowledge, and the war of vengeance took place in Celestia, the Great War, the heavenly principles grew scared of everyone learning the truth, because even the Four Shades and all the angels probably didn't know the truth at this time. When forbidden knowledge in the Abyss was introduced, the delusions that the Goddess of Flowers mentions in her artifacts that we talked about, the Heavenly Principles got scared, not so benevolent anymore, and started casting divine nails, pretty much clean slating Teyvat almost like a factory reset on your computer, only it annihilated everyone and everything. Almost everyone and everything. Even the angels and the shades were cast down and banished in exile and torment, because they learned some forbidden truths as well. God only knows what happened to the Moon Sisters. Now, the Abyss is officially introduced to Teyvat, so the Celestial Nails were necessary, but it was also necessary to cleanse humanity. Clean slate Celestia banish all of the Seelies. We learn this from Renova talking about an act of love. See, all of the angels and shades were created to guide humanity. They've only ever lived and known Teyvat. And to do this, this is their purpose. But to the Primordial One, they were tools for the first era of humanity. Now that is all compromised. So to completely factory reset everything, you had to cleanse humanity that now had too much knowledge. They knew they were in a samsara. They knew something was amiss. Nibelung shook things up when he brought the Abyss and forbidden knowledge. And now the angels were aware too. Something was up. So unless you slipped through the cracks like the people of Enkanomiya, that got to survive a little while longer and keep these preserved secrets of the old world. If you were an angel, you were banished and exiled in torment as a Seelie, a shadow of your former self, with no physical body, stripped of everything you once were. And the shades went into hiding, in fear of the Heavenly Principles. Teyvat had the Abyss introduced, everything was shaken up, and Celestia in ruin. Teyvat was now cleansed and stabilized for the time being, but now, for the second era of humanity, that would be clueless to everything that happened before, which is exactly what the Primordial One would want. Celestia would need new role models for humanity, now that the angels have been banished. This is where the Archon War comes into play, having all of the gods down in Teyvat duke it out for a divine throne and a gnosis, to be the new guidance and role models for humanity in the second era of humanity, being oblivious to what came before. Unless you're King Deshret and got a chance to be friends with Nabu, one of those angels that got banished, but fortunately got to keep her body. And King Deshret would learn everything, and ultimately refuse a gnosis. Him, along with his entire civilization, would perish. Orobashi would escape to Enkanomiya, learn all of these truths as well, and be sentenced to death by Celestia. And once 7 Archons were finally established, the Heavenly Principles would tighten their grip and their strict set of principles. Ruling through benevolence didn't work last time, so this time we will try fear. That is why the Archons greatly fear the Heavenly Principles, their wrath, and their judgment. For humanity's own good, Teyvat and its false sky would be less of a safe haven bubble, and now it would start to turn into a prison. Hence why Renova's terrified for the Heavenly Principles to learn that the Shade of Death actually gave her power to humans to be Archons. Egeria gave humanity to Oceanids and was met with a prophecy. It's just like the Goddess of Flowers says. The angels did not know they were tools for Celestia, but the Archons would be fully aware of this. If you step out of line, you will meet a gruesome and devastating end. To not again try to be curious to break out of the samsara that they're in, this endless cycle. And from what we learn, the 4 shades, from the shadows, secretly cultivating all of the Archons, and playing major roles within every nation. Even Renova herself states that she gave her power to the first Pyro Archon, a big no-no, making a mere mortal human an Archon. The Lord of Night saying that the Heavenly Principles already upset that the Shade of Death overstepped, and this is without knowing she gave her power to a human. Renova states that if the Heavenly Principles ever found out, she would say that it was stolen from her. This is how scared they were of the Heavenly Principles. And like I've talked about before, each region has its own circumstance which a shade plays a big role with the Archons, and how each nation came to be in this new era of humanity. But somewhere underground, the pinnacle of human arrogation was brewing, an underground subterranean nation known as Khaenri'ah, that quite literally represents every single thing that Celestia and the Primordial One are against. They took the arrogation of mankind, quote, and pumped it up tenfold. They have taken every bit of alien technology they could get their hands on, the the art of Khaenri'ah, different science and alchemy arts, monsters, beings from other worlds, created monsters and different beings and technologies that they stole from other worlds. Pretty much every ruin machine that you see scattered around Teyvat, the colossal ones, the bosses, the ruin guards, they are all alien tech. The perpetual mechanical array is quite literally alien tech to mimic the hypostasis. And every single ruin monster kind of mimics a very primitive elemental life form within Teyvat. And if you look at Khaenri'ah as a whole nation, it's a subterranean kingdom, not ruled over and governed by an Archon for Celestia. They originally had the Crimson Moon dynasty and later the Eclipse dynasty, which was the last known dynasty before the Cataclysm 500 years ago. We know less about the Crimson Moon era, but it's said during this era a Crimson Moon actually shone over Khaenri'ah. So a bright red Crimson Moon would shine over Khaenri'ah. We know the moon resembles the three moon sisters, who lived in Old Celestia in the Lunar Palace, said to be dead now. Perhaps a dead moon sister would shine over Khaenri'ah as now a Crimson Moon, and granted them special abilities. The Moon Sisters do have a lot of connections over fate as well. Everyone's memories and histories is connected to Irminsul and the False Sky. We've talked about this before. But certain characters get exempt. Perhaps Khaenri'ah was able to harness the power of a dead Moon Sister, and that's why characters that are cursed by the Crimson Moon, like Arlecchino, glitch in Teyvat, because they're kind of outside the coding of Teyvat, the giant cycle in Samsara. Arlecchino is a glitch in the system, and during the Crimson Moon era, whoever ruled over Khaenri'ah during this time would house orphan children who they summoned beyond this world. So already, Khaenri'ah was doing what their ancestors did in the old world, betraying Celestia and their segregation, for the literal purpose to find a child who could transcend the gods, defy the laws. Ever since the beginning, the Primordial One's been trying to be benevolent, but only when it can control everyone. But eventually the Crimson Moon would set and the dark sun descended into a yet darker dusk. And this is where the Eclipse dynasty comes into place. Now the big difference between the Eclipse dynasty and the Crimson Moon, both organizations throughout Khaenri'ah explored with alien tech and magic. The big difference being that the Crimson Moon era, they explored more alchemy and science of outside worlds and alien sciences. In the Eclipse dynasty era, it was more technologies, such as the Ruin Mech, while the other nations were carefully obeying Celestia in order to not get punished. Khaenri'ah was building these monstrosities, technologies that they literally took from other worlds. And these alien advancements no doubt plays a huge part into why humans from Khaenri'ah are so powerful, like the Captain, who is a fraction of his full power and can still compete with an Archon, a strong Archon at that, Piero, Dainsleif. Khaenri'ah had some juggernaut human beings. Beings so strong, you just know it would piss off Celestia. This is not what the Primordial One had in mind when they created humanity to be their benevolent god, and they could just live quiet, humble lives forever in their false sky. That's what's so fascinating about Khaenri'ah, is it's the exact opposite. Khaenri'ah did everything in its humanly power to defy Celestia on every turn, under their nose, until the Cataclysm would hit. Unfortunately, their arrogation was so great that it caused their own downfall and almost brought an end to Teyvat as we know it through the Abyss and the Cataclysm. Multiple Archons were killed, and the Heavenly Principles themselves had to deal with the situation and have been in a slumber now for 500 years since. That is why we haven't seen them, and that is why they haven't punished anyone severely yet. When the Heavenly Principles does awaken, this is the second calamity where they would have to clean slate Teyvat yet again. I assume that there's going to be another reckoning for humanity and punishment to the Archons once they do. The Abyss has now more influence in Teyvat than ever, and because the Heavenly Principles probably sustained some damage through the Abyss and corruption, they never got to completely clean slate Teyvat after the Cataclysm and cleanse the forbidden knowledge to keep the secret in the samsara safe. Hence where the Fatui are right now. The Fatui had the chance to spend the last 500 years preparing for the next big rebellion against the cycle in Samsara, the false sky. hence why all Fatui Harbingers have incredible knowledge about how Teyvat actually functions as a prison. A once big secret that the Primordial One had to themselves when they first came to Teyvat in the first era of humanity, the Fatui Harbingers know every single bit of it. They're collecting the Gnosis from the Archons. The Archons don't seem to mind giving it up either. It seems that they are fed up with this whole system as well. They're just a higher ranking prisoner after all. The burning of Irminsul is foreshadowed for the Fatui to do this, and in a Q&A, the developer stated that the burning of Irminsul is a future event yet to happen. We've talked in this video a lot about how Irminsul and the False Sky and the constellations play a part in everyone's fate, the coded data that predetermines your whole life, the giant samsara. Guess what? They know exactly what they're doing, and the captain is ultra confident that they can pull it off. The Abyss still remains a threat to Teyvat, but the Fatui Harbingers are the current in-game era of humanity's arrogation to break away from the control, and every little bit of Khaenri'ah technology from both eras eventually seeped over into the other nations. Humanity even barely knew about the elements. We learned in Natlan and Ochka Natlan that the dragons actually introduced the humans to different elemental energies and how to harness that, how to use phlogiston. And in each nation it's a different circumstance. If you look at Fontaine, you have the Narsusenkroins that started experimenting with Khaenri'ah tech, the Abyss, and quantum and imaginary energies. The quantum and imaginary energies are fascinating because they stem from the deepest roots of the Hoyoverse, the imaginary tree in the Sea of Quanta, essentially the basis of the Hoyoverse universe. So naturally to Teyvat and its people, these would be unfamiliar. And even in Teyvat, they don't even call them quantum and imaginary. They refer to it in Fontaine as Ocean and Numian energies, which you can find all around the map. And from there, Fontaine got really advanced. But even in Fontaine's more ancient times, the kingdom of Remuria, we learned, was also very advanced. I mean shit, even Sumeru has Wi-Fi with their Akasha system. We haven't even touched on the 5 sinners of Khaenri'ah yet. All beings that have all but confirmed transcended Teyvat at some point or another. We know that Rhine-daughter, the alchemist Gold, brought a dragon Ilia to Teyvat that ended up being killed in Fontaine. And from their remains spawned the Melusine, humanoid creatures that are now part of Fontaine's society. Guess what? Aliens. Skirk, who is an immensely powerful individual and a disciple of Sertalugi, one of the 5 sinners, who spends pretty well all of her time in the Abyss, and she's from another ancient world according to her, a dark realm from the corners of the universe. She also states that in her realm time flows differently, and she can be seen to use some different kind of powers. It looks like quantum powers to me, especially when the all-devouring narwhal eats you. You go into this different plane that looks a lot like the Sea of Quanta. According to her, 3 months in her realm amounts to 3 days in Teyvat. That is why when Tartaglia fell into the Abyss and was found by Skirk, he trained vigorously, turning a timid young boy into a bloodthirsty warrior. Skirk can also defeat Tartaglia without using any of her arms, and he's a pretty powerful dude and a great fighter. I can't even imagine how strong Sertalugi is. And Tartaglia's transformation is called the Fowl's Legacy. So although Tartaglia is native to Teyvat, he has abilities and powers that are not. The point I'm trying to make is that somebody like Skirk is completely outside the programming. They are limitlessly powerful, can be seen to use legitimate quantum energy, and have already placed their influence on Teyvat through Tartaglia and his training. And he's part of the Fatui, and obviously they're very important to the current arrogation of mankind against the divine. And all different instances throughout history, whether it be the first era of humanity or even after that. And humanity's most common and efficient way to combat Teyvat's control on fate is, well, alien influence. Things that are not bound by Teyvat's law, whether it be individuals that are alien or technologies, really just about anything. The only time humanity was content to just live under the Primordial One, under their set of principles, and be obedient, whether it be for their own good or not, was in the earliest days when it first got established. This is like the only time in Genshin Impact history that the heavenly principles are referred to as very benevolent and just. Soon as humans got curious, they got bitter. Does that mean the heavenly principles are doing this for everyone's own good? Or are they just a control freak trying to control humanity, how they evolve, just to live as their prisoners for eternity in the samsara? I think it originally came from a place of love. There is evidence to suggest that the heavenly principles isn't an evil being. They could have slaughtered the dragons when they came here, they didn't. They had the right intentions to protect humanity from all of the threats of the outside world. They obviously thought this was the necessary way to do things, and in a lot of ways it's true. If you let humanity just be completely free, they will explore the outside world and eventually be their own demise. Like we learned in Khaenri'ah, humanity will literally kill itself just to break free from this control. And from what we can see through the Abyss, the Narwhal, somebody like Skirk, there are genuine threats out there. But if watching cartoons, Disney movies, different animes and shows, even the Marvel movies, controlling humanity for its own good is not the answer either. It's just like in the Captain America movies. You have a faction called Hydra that wants to control the world in order to protect it. But in order to protect humanity, you have to sacrifice your freedom. Captain America words it like this: you put a gun to everyone's head but call it security. That is what the heavenly principles is doing. You're controlling everyone's destiny, their lives. They are trapped. Humanity should have the option to be able to protect itself from the external threats, whatever that may be. Allow them to advance in their own way. Yes, it might result in much more war. Maybe humanity ultimately kills itself, but true freedom is allowing them to make up that decision for themselves. Even if you think they can't be trusted with it, and maybe they would kill themselves within 500 years. But if you try to control humanity and their fates, something like the Cataclysm in Khaenri'ah is just going to keep happening over and over and over again. It's never going to stop. You can create angels to help guide them, Archons to control them with fear. You can wipe out their civilizations and make them restart from scratch, but it's gonna keep happening, because that is the nature of humanity, and that is the biggest flaws of the heavenly principles. With each new era of humanity, the heavenly principles gets more strict in their rules, because humanity keeps getting curious in their arrogation to break away from the principles. But the tighter the grip, the more humanity tries to break free, and the dragons are no different. Nibelung was so bitter to the usurper that it left, came back, and pretty well damned humanity, the dragons and Celestia alike, by introducing the Abyss in order to get its revenge. And that is why Khaenri'ah summoned aliens, the travelers, the characters we play as to begin with, to defy these rules, the principles, in an ultimate act of arrogation. But it also begs the question, why? Why is this all happening? Why is the heavenly principles doing this to begin with? Why did the Primordial One come here? Why Teyvat of all places? We know that there's a lot of larger-than-life threats in the Hoyoverse. You have the Eons and Emanators in many different worlds within Honkai Star Rail. But when Genshin Impact was released, Honkai Impact 3rd was the other main Hoyoverse game that was out, and I really do believe, honest in my heart, that the Primordial One was running from the Honkai. I'm not really going to speculate whether the Primordial One is a Herrscher or a Emanator of sorts, some sort of god that lived in another world. Maybe they came from a world that every single person was the same as the Primordial One. The Primordial One wasn't a god where they came from, just a person. A much more advanced civilization. And that is the point of the Honkai. The Honkai isn't a living being or entity, but it's a mysterious life-threatening phenomenon. It comes in the form of anything that can wipe out civilization, whether it be radiation, storms, weather, monsters, anything you can think of. And it originates from the Hoyoverse roots of the multiverse, the imaginary tree itself. It's a purging system. But humans want to advance their civilization and stop being abrupted by the Honkai. So in many different instances, humans try to combat the Honkai and whatever it brings to wipe out their civilization. So perhaps in a desperate attempt to escape the Honkai, the heavenly principles or the Primordial One found a world they could try to isolate from it. But that's the irony. The Honkai targets advanced civilization, so the Primordial One, from everything that we know in Teyvat's entire history, has been preventing humans from doing this, so much so that they trap them in a samsara, an endless cycle before they can advance too far. In its own weird way, the Primordial One is the Honkai, and they don't even know it. You're not allowing humans to progress naturally. You're stopping it before it can even happen by controlling their literal destinies and fate. Or perhaps the Abyss is the Honkai. Just the Abyss in general can corrupt anyone or anything living within Teyvat, gods, dragons, and humans alike. The game even states that the three Moon sisters might have killed each other due to their abyssal corruption, and anytime we've ever seen somebody corrupted by the Abyss, they turn incredibly hostile and start attacking everyone. In Natlan, their Pyro Sovereign was corrupted by the Abyss, and it started laying waste to the ley lines and the civilizations there. And we know from Dvalin in Mondstadt, the very first chapter we played, what the Abyss can do. How it corrupts even powerful individuals. Maybe the Abyss is Teyvat's form of Honkai since it manifests into anything that's world-ending. It's hard to really say exactly. I feel I've rambled long enough, and that is the function and purpose of the False Sky. What it does, what it always did, and what it will continue to do. How humanity is going to react to it in the upcoming story of Genshin Impact is going to be interesting. And like I already said, I don't believe the Heavenly Principles to be evil, but I think their ideals and what they're trying to do is flawed. From the in-game texts and lore that we can find, it's pretty apparent what they're trying to do. The Heavenly Principles obviously scared of what's outside. So much so that they're controlling everything within a prison now. But I don't think controlling humanity is the answer. And to be honest, they've been failing miserably. Aliens have been breaching Teyvat since the beginning. If the Primordial One was the original alien, they must have known that others were gonna come here as well. Probably to escape from whatever they came to isolate from in the first place. I still think it's funny that Skirk just pops into Teyvat like, oh, you don't know what the Gnosis are? Oh my god. As for the Hexen Circle, they are the big anomaly in Genshin Impact so far. I do think the Hexen Circle does originate from Teyvat, but I think it's a group of witches that are hyper aware of every single thing that's going on as well. They know about the data of Teyvat, the constellations, Irminsul. Alice herself is the one that states that the border of Teyvat is weakened due to the Heavenly Principles not being able to repair it, which is why the Pyro Archon was able to blast through it. Having two world-ending calamities stop, the Heavenly Principles is probably in a very weakened, maybe even corrupted state. But ultimately, let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think of all this, the greater story of Teyvat? I'm curious to read your comments. I'm not sure if I'll actually be making another video or not before Christmas, so just in case, I'd like to say now, I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas and a happy holiday. I hope you have a wonderful time with your family and friends. Just in 1 year, I cannot believe how well the channel has been doing, how well it's been growing, and it's all thanks to you guys, so I just wanted to say thank you. Right away in the new year, we're going to be getting Natlan's 5.3 and final Archon quest chapter, which is going to give us some insane lore. But we're also getting Honkai Star Rail's big 3.0 patch in Amphorius. So it's going to be a crazy new year, and very busy for me for lore, but that's a good problem to have. So again, thank you all so much for supporting the channel, supporting me, giving me both positive and constructive feedback over the last year. And as always, we will see you all in the next one. Merry Christmas.